How's it going, everybody? It's Riley's Redzone here, and welcome back to another NFL video. And for a while, the background that I am in is going to look quite a bit different than what you're probably used to. I am now in college, but we're continuing the experience in the dorm room. So, welcome, and we're back to regularly scheduled programming as the football season is almost upon us. I know where I'm at. College games start next week, and that means the NFL is also getting close. So in today's video, I'm going to be predicting the outcome of the 2023 season of the NFL. I'm going to cover how well I think teams will do. I kind of went through and gave exact record predictions, as well as we're going to talk who might win some awards and who do I think in the long run could end up winning the Super Bowl. So let's get started on the AFC side. Let's first talk about the AFC East, where this is a stacked division. I think that all four teams could make a case at making the playoffs, but I really think there's a couple elite teams here that are even in Super Bowl contention. So starting with, I have the Bills and the Jets at 12-5. And now I'll say give a little bit of leniency on the exact number of wins and losses, as I care more about the order of the teams, but give a general idea. I went through every single game of the season, predicted who I think would win, gave a little bit of some upsets as well, so it wasn't straight up. So you won't see any teams with, above, I think it was 13 wins was the highest I had, but that means I didn't have as many low teams either. But 12-5, I had two teams here. The Bills, I expected to be pretty high, as they, for the last few years, have been a Super Bowl contender. Now, I have made the potential mistake of picking them to win the Super Bowl. I think now it's been, in the last four prediction videos, at least three of those four, if not the four times. And I have to be honest, I don't know if their window is open much longer. I think it seems, if anything, they might, unfortunately, now some of their players are aging, but Josh Allen is still super talented and can lead that team. It's just going to take them getting it done in the playoffs. For whatever reason, they just haven't been able to quite hold up and finish the job for a number of reasons, it seems, but I think that their roster, really stacked, really, really good. They have a lot of position players that are going to benefit them this year. This year in the draft, they grabbed Dalton Kincaid to help on the offensive side. But defensively, I think that their edge rush room for the last few years has always been really, really deep, which is important. I think that's maybe the most important position, is kind of that edge rush defensive line, to have fresh legs as often as you can. Now, I believe in the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers quite a bit this season. I did not expect them to get as many wins as I have them at. It helps them having not as good of a record last year, and now they have maybe the most upgraded roster in the NFL, and so you can easily make advantage of that bottom of the division schedule and turn it into an advantage that you play some easier opponents. I found that a lot of times I picked them in games where they maybe were playing a more inexperienced team, and I'll say this too. I think that the Jets, even if they end up 10-7, 9-8, even if they just squeak into the playoffs, I think that they could be like some other teams we've seen before, that they make an upset as that wild card team, because I think Aaron Rodgers' experience is going to be really beneficial. The recent addition of Dalvin Cook, although I didn't think it was necessary, certainly a benefit, and that is great for their roster. And so they might not get 12 wins, but that's what I have them at, and so they easily make the playoffs in this situation. And also squeaking in here is the Miami Dolphins. I could easily expect a fall off for the Miami Dolphins. I think that, a lot of things went well for them last year, but I also think if you get a healthy Tua for a majority of the season, that can help them out quite a bit, and we'll see what happens. They brought in Mike White, although it looked like they were playing Skylar Thompson ahead of him as insurance, so if Tua goes down, I don't love their situation here, but assuming he's healthy, you still have Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. I'll be interested to see who they involve the most at running back, but I really think that they have defensively as well upgraded. The addition of Jalen Ramsey is huge as well, but I think that on paper, another team that I did not expect them to get as many wins as I had them getting at, but their roster is solid in my opinion. And so with a healthy Tua, I expect the team to make the playoffs. How far they get, we'll talk about later, but assuming Tua is healthy, I think that they easily can make it here. Now, the Patriots could be a little dangerous, but I think it goes back to I think Mac Jones is an all right quarterback, but I don't think he has the ceiling that you need to be a competitive team in the league and really be a threat to other teams, specifically in the AFC. The AFC quarterback position, all the quarterbacks in AFC are really, really solid. And I think that the Patriots, although Mac Jones is an all-right quarterback, I don't think he has the ceiling of some of these other players. He's certainly, I think, a little underrated at times, but it goes back to what I said in his draft profile, where he could be a capable average starter, a Derek Carr, a Kirk Cousins type maybe. But right now, I'm thinking that even seems above what it might be. I wouldn't be surprised if it for some reason doesn't go well that they switch to Bailey Zappi by the end of the season. I expect an average season. I wouldn't call Belichick on the hot seat at all, but something to keep an eye out for if they weren't to do better than what I have them at, which is 7-10. Now let's go ahead and jump to the AFC North, where another division, you'll see a trend. I have the AFC divisions a lot better teams than the NFC. In the AFC, I have the Bengals on top of the North here. I think that another team that I maybe expect a fall off for, that I just didn't find it in the schedule, even though they've won the division. I found that in their schedule, I have them getting 13 wins. I think that what could ultimately hurt this division is like some other divisions, but specifically this one, I think division games are very often split. I think that those are games that I pretty often gave the home team a win here and the away team if there wasn't a big gap between the teams. And so this is a great example of, maybe division kind of hurts itself and eats each team out of the playoffs. Like in this case, where I had 4 teams getting 10 wins. Do I think this might actually happen? Probably not. But just going through each game and picking who I thought would win, this is what happened. I mean, I started it off, I kind of went in different orders of predicting the teams, and I was at first thinking, wow, the Browns might get like 11 or 12 wins. They were a little surprising, but we'll get there. Let's go back to the Bengals here. Bengals offensively, really, really solid. And I'll say that defensively, although on paper I've never thought their defensive roster looks as consistent or has the depth of some other teams, I think that they get it done as a unit, which is all you need to do. They've even proved that they can win in the playoffs, which I think is very important. And obviously with Joe Burrow perhaps making a case, I think right now it's clear he's a top 3 easily, but I think you could say the top 2 quarterback right behind Mahomes right now. And with Jamar Chase still there and you get T. Higgins, I think that their offense is no problem. It's really going to be their defense, if anything. But once again, it just seems like they haven't really downgraded much. And as much as I kind of doubt sometimes how their ceiling could be with the players they have, they just get it done. And so I really think that their D coordinator and their whole entire defensive staff has done a really, really good job. And I think he'll get some, head coaching interviews this next process. But now jumping to the Steelers, they might be the biggest surprise for me getting as many wins as they had. And I think that it's because of their defense. I am not a huge Kenny Pickett believer. I think that he's around the same realm, maybe a little bit better than what Mac Jones was. And as I just talked about with Jones, his ceiling could be a average quarterback. I see that similar to Pickett, but I think he has a little bit more of an it factor to him. I think that his upside is slightly higher than what Mac Jones is. And so I think it's a similar light, but the defense and the roster construction for the Steelers compared to the Patriots for me is, I think the Steelers have a really, really solid defense. They've built a great team and core defensively over there. And I also think that what is the concern is definitely the offensive line. Now, I expect the receivers to take a big step up. I think Deontay will maybe get back to form if people thought he fell off a little bit. And I think George Pickens is going to be a huge breakout for them. But I think that offensive line is just going to be the big question for the Steelers. And I had enough games where I think the defense was able to overcome that and get themselves a win, but that's definitely the concern here with the Steelers is your offensive line. How are they going to do there? I like the Ravens roster a ton. I think that Lamar, I think it was smart to give him the contract as much as there was a debacle on how difficult that was going to be to set up. I think it was the right move. Credit to him, getting a contract. I thought that they were going to maybe get to the 11, and they didn't. I easily could see the Ravens making the playoffs, though. And, they just lost their preseason streak last night. But I think that even with that, there's some concern, with in the past, they just run the ball. Are they going to be able to bring it down the field? And with new coordinator Todd Monken, I think that they will throw the ball a little bit more. And I personally don't doubt Lamar's ability much. And I think bringing in OBJ, although a little expensive for the guy who hasn't played in a while, was a good idea. They bring in Zay Flowers in the draft. They still have Rashad Bateman. I think that with some potential upgrades at receiver there, I think that their offense is set to go. And their defense is still a pretty solid roster. Another example of where, it's a Mike Tomlin coach team, a John Harbaugh coach team that they're never bad. I mean, it's just, you always got a shot with them. And I think that they're going to keep the boat afloat here. But once again, it comes down to, are these teams going to kind of beat themselves out of the playoffs? And in comes the Cleveland Browns, which is a huge question mark. I think the entire season rides on Deshaun Watson. And unfortunately, with all the off-the-field issues last year and everything, he, in a limited stunt, he was suspended a while, and he did not show any skill of what we saw before. Really disappointing. They were better with Jacoby Brissett a lot of the times. This entire season is going to be basically on him, because I love their defensive roster. It is amazing. I mean, just looking at the players and matching up, I'd match up each team's offense versus defense and try to figure out who I think was going to have the advantage. And I love this Browns defense. I mean, you have Myles Garrett, you bring in Zadarius Smith. They keep even bringing in free agents, and they have the solid corners, and they just have everything you need defensively. And I think that the questions come on offense, of course. You have Nick Chubb, the most sure thing running back in the NFL. I mean, he might lead the league in rushing again this year. At receiver, you have Amari Cooper, which is great. Then there's a little bit of question marks there, but I think with the right setup, that Donovan Peoples-Jones can be capable too. I loved Elijah Moore coming out of the draft. I think that those are all potential solutions. It's just going to be down to Watson, because I'll tell you this. I think that with a healthy and back to capable Deshaun Watson, I think this team could get 12 wins easily, because their defense is so good. And even if that's a problem, let's go back. I mean, I would say this 10 win is about, I'd say 9 to 10 is probably the floor, like the average. Assuming they're still going to run the ball a lot with Nick Chubb, I think a Nick Chubb offense can still get you that 8, 9, 10 range. It's just going to be how efficient Deshaun Watson is that gets him back. Because if he is terrible, I would not be surprised to see this team towards the bottom again, maybe 4 to 6 wins. If he's capable, which is what I kind of have them at, you end up about here, which is 9 or 10. But if he is back to a quality starter level, I think you're easily talking 12 wins, and it's not even much of a hesitation for me to say that. But once again, stacked division, a lot of good teams here, but I have the Bengals right now as the top option. Then in the South, this is where you start to get the drop-off. The Jaguars, I loved them last season at the end. I predicted them to at least get 1 win in the playoffs, and they did, because, I think that they were a team that I could see kind of getting momentum. That's when you need to get momentum, is at the end of the season. I still think of some prime examples. This was a great example of last year of a team going and doing that. When Rodgers used to say, run the table, let's do it, relax, they did well. The opposite of that I always think of is, I think it was 2019 maybe, or 18, the Steelers, they started like 10 or 11-0, Washington goes in, breaks that streak. They just start slipping fast, and they, lost first round. So I think that's important. The Jaguars ended so well last season. I think they'll start a little bit better. I do think, though, their schedule is tougher because they ended up winning the division. I think that with an easier schedule, this could have been a 12. I love Trevor Lawrence in this offense. Pretty good roster defensively as well, but I have them at 11, which is enough to win the division, but I think they'll be in the mix again this year. The Colts were a team I was very shocked to have where I did as well. I didn't even think they were going to be this close at all. I expected them to be around 6, and they get to 8 wins here with Anthony Richardson at the helm, at the quarterback position. Now, since I made the prediction, which was just like yesterday, the day before, mapping all this out, there's been some updates on the Jonathan Taylor situation. They are now going to allow him to seek a trade, which definitely changes the game here because I was expecting him still there. But honestly, I think that now it's tough with Dalvin Cook and Zeke off the market, but you could still go get a Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, maybe. Otherwise, I think they'll be fine. I think Jonathan Taylor is a really good player. I could easily see them dropping to 6 or 7 wins here with that. But for now, I think they're going to be a dark horse team. They have some talent on both sides of the ball. Richardson has the biggest upside, I would say, of kind of besides that top group. I really like Bryce Young, but C.J. Stroud I like as well. But I really think that Richardson has the special factor. It's just going to be whether he's consistent. But I got them to 8 wins, which of course isn't enough for a playoffs, but that would be a pretty solid season for them. Now the Titans, I had them starting really slow. Then they hit a middle of the stretch where I think that they could pick up some wins. Tannehill used to be my favorite player about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. He's not the same anymore. I think he's still in the average tier, but I'm easily going to predict that they will switch to Will Levis, probably around that midseason mark, and I think that Will Levis will pick up a couple wins, and then it's over for Tannehill starting time in Tennessee. But I think that the same thing. I think they start slow, pick up some wins in the middle, and they just end up an average season. You see what you have in Will Levis. I liked Will Levis. Obviously, he fell in the draft quite a bit. I mean, I didn't expect him to really be a top 5 guy, but I saw some top 10 pick potential. He has the size. I think he was able to do a number of things. Wasn't really a one-trick pony at all. Sneakily quick and mobile, but that I have them getting to 7 here. My biggest surprise, I'd say, on the other end of a team that did not get as many as I thought they were going to is the Texans. But then it was when I looked at their roster further. Their core pieces of what they're building, really, really solid. I love the D'Amico Ryans hiring. C.J. Stroud was a great quarterback. For me, he was the second best quarterback in the class. Will Anderson is a difference maker. That was amazing that they were able to get him as well. They have some sneaky good players, like, they still have Derek Stingley to develop. Denzel Perriman is sneaky. But there just are so many question marks on all these other. The Texans for the last 3 years, for me, every single free agency reminds me of, like, going on Madden and when you start your franchise in training camp or in preseason, going to the free agents tab and just like picking a 1-year contract for a couple of decent players. That's what it always seems to me. I think that the Texans, getting Dalton Schultz was a decent swing, but I think they could swing at the fences a little further because their core players, their future is really, really bright. But right now, I think they just still have too many question marks at that, overall. So I have them only at 3 wins. I think that they could get more because I really like what D'Amico Ryans is doing. But right now, I think they might be a little underwhelming. But even if this happens, you can't lose hope. C.J. Stroud is still the guy. Will Anderson was still a great pick. Still developed Stingley. You still have a future there. Now to the West. The Chiefs. It's hard because I think every year you can make a case that they slip, and they just don't. Now, I'll say they always sometimes maybe could end up slipping in the regular season, but then they're going to keep going in the playoffs anyways. I think that the Chiefs are going to be there no matter what. They're going to be somewhere in that 12, 13, 14 win range. I had them getting to 12. I think they'll take it easy still in the regular season. Once again, playoffs is really when it matters. People question their receiving room last year. It's still a little bit questionable, but I think that Patrick Mahomes can make that work. Defensively, they're still just a great unit like the Bengals. Now the Chargers, I predicted that they would step up a little bit last year. Didn't quite happen to the level I wanted. Finally made the playoffs, with Herbert. I'm going to take that swing again next year, but the one thing that questions is still Brandon Staley. I don't think, he's right on a line where I wouldn't have fired him, but this is a make or break it year. If Brandon Staley does not get up to, for sure, 8, but I would say if they don't make the playoffs, in my opinion, I would move on. But the thing that gives me hope is because then you think all the focus is on the defensive side of the ball. Well, now you bring in Kellen Moore on offense, and I thought that was a great hiring. That was beautiful. I think that Herbert is a really, really talented quarterback, has all the skills. So now you get a good offensive coordinator. I think that brings their potential up to 12 wins here, which is what I have at. I think this is pretty high. I love their roster a lot. That's why I have them at 12. This is definitely probably on the higher side of an estimate. So if anything, it might not reach this. But I'm going to take the swing that they upgrade. The Broncos, I thought were almost going to make the playoffs here. I really like the hiring of Sean Payton. I think Russ will bounce back. Just ended up, for whatever reason, even with how bad basically they were last year, their schedule, it felt like, still was not really to their advantage. And so I only have them getting 8 wins. But I think that they're a team that's capable of probably 9 or 10. I don't think they might just not make the playoffs this year, but they're going to at least get close. And so you get one warm-up year with Sean Payton. I think by next year you get a couple more things figured out. I love their defensive roster too. I think that they'll be fine. So I think that it's going to be somewhere in the middle here. I think they're going to be a huge upgrade, though, and that will make Broncos fans happy. The Raiders, they're going to be, for me, there's one other team in the NFC that is on the bottom for me. I just don't love their roster construction right now. Just like Tannehill, I think that Jimmy G or Mac Jones, I think Jimmy G's an underrated quarterback. All he did is win in San Francisco, and they kept trying to move on from him. But I think it's a different situation here in Las Vegas. He does have Devontae Adams, but Garoppolo works so well in those systems that you don't have to throw the ball super far. You know how creative Kyle Shanahan is. And I think that although we reunite here with Josh McDaniels, I think that I'm still quite concerned on this team's roster and especially the ceiling with Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo is perfect for a team, honestly, like Jimmy Garoppolo on the Patriots right now or the Steelers, where it'd be a proven. That raises the floor of those teams by far. But I think that this is a team that needs some time to develop, and I don't know if Garoppolo has that time. I just don't know if this is going to work out. They have some talented players. It's just like the Texans, but I just couldn't get their collective roster really together to get some wins. So I have them only getting 2 wins, which is hard, but that's what I have them at. So one more time at the grand scheme of the predictions of the AFC, this is what they look like. So making the playoffs is going to be your top 4 teams there, the top one on each column, which is the Bills, Bengals, Jags, and Chiefs. And then in this situation, the Jets and the Chargers and the Dolphins are who make the wild card. I thought the Steelers were going to make it, but they just missed it. So when we get to the bracket later, that's what it'll look like. Now let's go on to the NFC side, starting with the NFC East. You're already you're going to see some hot takes here. So I have the Eagles. This is just like the Chiefs. The Eagles, I'm going to say, I think the Eagles have the best roster in the NFL. On paper, I think they do. Their depth is unbelievable. Howie Roseman has been finessing every draft, trade. It seems like he never misses. They keep, as I talked about before, with the Bills, the edge rush and the D-line is so important. They keep just refreshing, and it's so smart. And I give them credit. I think they'll stumble a few times maybe in a couple games. I honestly could easily see them getting 13 or 14. Just came down to some balancing. But I really think that this team is the best team in the NFL. On paper, their roster is the best. That's what I'm going to say there. We'll get to the playoffs and see how far they go. But on paper, the Eagles are absolutely stacked. The Cowboys, I did not expect to be maybe as high as many wins as they were here. I have them at 11. I think that their roster is really solid. It's all going to depend on if Dak can clean up the interceptions, of course, which I think he can. He's not an elite guy, but I think a pretty solid player. And so I think that with the rest of their roster, Micah Parsons and Diggs and everybody on the defense, I think they're going to be fine. I think that they are going to perhaps step up than what we'd consider last year. I think that, they could potentially here, even though Mike McCarthy's been doubted a lot, I think they'll get enough to make the playoffs for sure. Early in the offseason, I even had them going a little farther, but we'll talk about where they get later. But that's a team that I think actually will be a little bit of a sleeper. Sort of like the Washington Commanders. I have them somewhere in the middle. I think a lot of people are going to doubt Sam Howell. I think he's a capable quarterback. I liked him a lot coming out of the draft. I was shocked he fell to where he did. But either way, he has some potential. We saw it a little bit in the preseason game last night. I don't think they're going to be great. But the thing is, I think it's going to remind me of some other situations where Howell's going to be good enough to where you're not going to immediately replace him unless there's a top option available. But I don't think 6 wins is going to get you as low in the draft. Well, as high as the draft, really. A low number there to get you a top quarterback. So overall, I think that they're just going to be treading water, but I think that they're going to see enough flashes. The question's going to be with Ron Rivera because, I think that Eric Bieniemy will do a good job here. I think Howell will look good. I think this team will play better perhaps than what they have as of late. But I think that it's really going to come down to here how many wins they get. Because I think that they are going to be underrated, but I don't know if 6 is enough to keep everybody afloat, safe. So that's what I have happening there. I think they'll be sneaky. The biggest fall off of last season is I have the New York Giants. I think that this is just kind of a gut feeling one. It just mapped out this way. I just don't see the ceiling here. Paying Daniel Jones was an interesting move. The general idea of paying Daniel Jones, I don't necessarily disagree with. I think it was a large contract. But I just don't see it really on the defensive side of the ball here, and kind of they have a couple solid spots on the offensive line, but also the receivers are a big question mark to me. Who's going to be the one there? It might be Isaiah Hodgins. It might be still Sterling Shepard in the mix. It might be Paris Campbell. It might be Jalen Hyatt. I mean, there are so many options there that I don't know who it's going to be. And so my biggest fall off is the New York Giants with 4 wins. So that's kind of a hot take, but I'm going to go with that. I think that truly might happen. Next, we're going to go to the NFC North, where I have to say, there are a lot of discussions about some changing of the guard of who's going to be king of this division. And I still think it's going to be the Vikings. I think the Vikings are going to be the biggest example of a team where they are going to have a worse record than last season, but they are a better football team. As maybe I have a little bit of homer here, but I watched almost every game last year, and they got it done, but man, they were lucky. You could just tell there was some magic, but you could just tell the odds of that happening are wild. But I still think that they are a good enough football team. Kevin O'Connell showed enough. I think that they'll be a little bit more convincing in their wins when they do. I think they're also going to take some more losses, but I think that they're going to show more convincing wins against not as good teams compared to what they did last year. I think there'll be less close calls both directions. So I think their roster upgraded, even though they've let go of a lot of players. People question all the time, even I meet new people, and they question, why did they let go of Dalvin Cook? I personally think I don't disagree with the move. I think that it doesn't make that team better right now, but it saves you a lot of money. And if there is a position we've seen recently, I think Madison and Ty Chandler can be fine, even picking Dwayne McBride. They let go of, Kendricks on the defensive side and, a couple of other players that, you question. Some people, I think, questioned it, but I think that in the long run, it was time for them to move on. And so Zadarius Smith was another one. But next is going to be, a lot of people think either the Bears or the Lions are going to take that big step up. I do think both of them will take a step up, but I just see a little bit of games where I doubted the Lions getting a win against a tougher team. I don't know if they're to that level yet. I think they're better than they were last year, but I just think that I don't see them quite getting some of those tougher games with the win. But I might be wrong there. I think they could easily, I could see them getting to 9. I just don't see them getting that maybe a 10 or 11 hype that a lot of people are giving them. I think the team that I'm the highest on compared to normal people here is the Packers. I think a lot of people think the Packers are going to completely fall off. I don't think so. I think that they're not going to be as good, of course, without Rodgers. But I think Jordan Love is still a capable quarterback for sure. And so I think that's enough to where you'll be able to manage that. I think that they're going to be fine defensively. I still like their roster, even though their coordinator is questionable at times. I think that they're still going to squeak out 8 or 9 wins here. And then the Bears, I easily think will step up a ton. I love that addition of DJ Moore for them. I think defensively they upgraded. It's the same with the Lions where I just quite couldn't give them a few tough games where if they upgrade to that next tier, they might be able to get that couple extra wins. But I could see them winning it. But I just right now have kind of a balanced division. Might be kind of on the bottom end of divisions here of a top team, but they're all decent players and teams. The South is like normal. I have them as a weak division again. The Saints, though, I think are very underrated in the grand scheme. I think that they have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. Derek Carr will be pretty well for them, and I think Olave stepping up will be huge. Panthers, I also think are a really underrated team. I only have them getting to 8, but I love Bryce Young. I think that was a great pick. They're building a lot of players around him. I think that they're going to be good in the future. For now, though, I just have them at getting 8. Then I have the teardrop. So for me, it's going to be between these two teams. But I have the Saints winning. And then I got the Falcons to 6 somehow. I was a little shocked. I'm not a huge Desmond Ridder fan. As a long-term starter, I had like a 4th-round grade on him, and I thought that he'll be a capable backup. I don't see the ceiling there, but I also don't question Atlanta. I like the move to just give him a year. They brought in Taylor Heineke too if it all falls apart, but I think that it's smart for them to give him a year and see if he's the guy. And if he's not, just move on. And it reminds me of the Sam Howell situation where it's like, okay, you're at 6 wins. What do? Is that enough to move on or is it not? Now, I'll tell you a team that Baker Mayfield just was named the starter today, but I don't love the Bucs roster. I really don't. I think that it does come down a little bit to quarterback position. I think Baker's still all right, but I really just don't love the roster construction here. I think you lose some key players, more than just Tom Brady. But I think obviously their weapons on the outside, the receivers are still really good, but I just question still what the roster entails. So I have them as kind of the worst division here in the South, but should be tight. The Niners team, I could easily see getting 12-13 wins. It's all going to depend on the health of Brock Purdy. I think they're going to be pretty solid. I really do. I think their roster is really, really good. I think that they're going to be able to pass the ball. They're going to be able to run the ball as needed by any means necessarily. They're going to be able to move the ball. So, and their defense, I think, is really, really solid. So I have them easily getting to 11. It's probably on the low end, to be honest. I could easily see them getting to 12-13. I have the Seahawks kind of repeating last year as a, decent team. Not top of the line, but I think Geno's going to bounce back. Hopefully the Jackson Smith-Njigba injury is not too bad. That just came out today that, is having surgery, but we'll see what happens there. But I think they're going to be a decent team as well. The Rams, their roster is really bad defensively. It's really, really poor besides Aaron Donald. And Aaron Donald probably is a little overrated still right now. He's not. I don't think he's quite what he was, but he's still really, really good. But besides that, they just don't have much. But I couldn't have a Sean McVay coach team really falling. I had them winning a few kind of wins against some less experienced teams, even though the other team had stronger roster. I have them somewhere in the middle here. And if Sean McVay chooses to leave for broadcasting, totally understandable there, but I wouldn't fire him if they get even to 7 wins with this roster because it is terrible. And in the end, everything was worth it because they won that Super Bowl. Cardinals are probably the biggest wild card. They're going to be starting probably Colt McCoy, but I've seen even injury things there. And they might be starting Clayton Tune at quarterback, David Blau at quarterback to start the season. So I don't expect them to do well at all to begin the season until they get Kyler back. But then it's going to be, how long is Kyler healthy? I think that they will realistically maybe win one, but maybe not win a game until Kyler gets back. But then it's how much of a run can he put out there. I have them getting to 5, and I think that's a happy medium. I think that's somewhere in the middle of what could potentially happen there for the Cardinals. So this is the grand scheme here. On the NFC side, top teams once again make it, and in this case, the wild card is the Cowboys, the Lions, and Seahawks. So Panthers and Packers almost made it. So let's talk about this playoffs here. Let's go over this. I'm going to go over this relatively quickly just because you can see what I have going on here. But basically, have some division games on the AFC wild card. I think the Bills are clear over the Dolphins there, even though it was tight last year. Chargers could be sneaky, but I have the Chiefs getting that one. And then the Jaguars, although they'd be, the home team here, I think the Aaron Rodgers experience helps them a lot. NFC wild card, Niners I have easily winning over the Lions. Vikings Seahawks would be really, really tough. I have the Vikings though winning. I think they're a better team than last year, even though once again, the record might not say so. And the Cowboys, once again, I think are a sneaky team. They'd win over the Saints here. Then I have the Bengals over the Jets, which is really hard because I think the Jets are going to do really well, but I don't know if they quite get all the way with those offensive line concerns, but I think they're going to be a ton better, obviously, with Aaron Rodgers. So I have the Bengals going pretty far, there. And then the Chiefs-Bills, going to be a classic. I've fallen for the bait of picking the Bills so many times, so they're probably going to win this if this happens now because I'm saying this, but I've picked 4 of them so many times and they just quite haven't delivered, so I'm not going to make them the same mistake 5 times or 4 times at this point. And then on the NFC side, I have the Niners easily beating the Vikings at that point, and the Eagles, the Cowboys could be sneaky, but I just think the roster is so good for the Eagles. Bengals, Chiefs, I think on paper actually might have it, but I just have a feeling kind of about the Bengals. I think that Joe Burrow might get some revenge here and come up clutch. And then the Eagles and the Niners, I just think the Eagles roster is a little bit stronger. And then here for the Bengals and the Eagles, once again, the Eagles on paper have the biggest advantage. On paper, they have the best roster, but I think that Super Bowl hangover can exist. So I'm going to go with the Bengals just out of pure feeling right now. I think Joe Burrow's on another level. Just because I think it's more likely that the Eagles don't make it this far than it is the Bengals do. But I'm going to go with that as my playoff predictions. And let's close this video out with some award predictions. Thank you so much for sticking this long in the video if you are still here. MVP, I got Joe Burrow. If he's doing that well with the best record in the league, he's going to win it. He's an elite player. I have Justin Jefferson repeating on the Offensive Player of the Year, although Jamar Chase was my definite second. Could easily see him winning that with Burrow. Defensive Player of the Year, I went with Micah Parsons. I think he's going to be a threat defensively, and I think the Cowboys will be good enough record-wise that he'll be in contention. Offensive Rookie of the Year, even though their record might not be the best, Bijan Robinson is a stud. I think that he could win that easily. And then Will Anderson Jr., same thing. Even though they're only going to be like 3-14, he's a stud and I think a star in the future. And then I have Robert Saleh winning Coach of the Year, as that is kind of the biggest upgrade in wins. Now, a huge part of that's going to be responsible for Aaron Rodgers, but still, I think that the big upgrade normally results in the Coach of the Year. So thank you so much for watching this video. This is the first one, obviously, in the new setting, and we'll be here for a while. I'll probably maybe be making some announcements in the future because you will hopefully be seeing me still doing what I love and doing this, but on some other platforms and other channels potentially too. And so really, if you didn't know, I am actually at college studying sports broadcasting, basically. So I'll announce further details down the line for specifics, but basically Riley's Red Zone is still going. You just might also see me at some other spots. So for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.